Hi everyone, welcome to week 6. I just want to share a few thoughts, some general feedback on your portfolio entries thus far, and also some ideas that I have with regard to this week's readings. Some general feedback is to use the videos that I've posted thus far to help you make sense of the readings. And in your entries, try to stay away from moralizing these concepts that Singers is proposing. Or painting a good versus a bad picture, the bad capitalists and the good Samaritans. In many ways, this falls back into the very problem that Stingers is trying to challenge. So instead of taking sides or pointing blame, consider how you might think in the middle of these 2 points and pick up on the complexities of capitalist rationalities and how these logics are not something that exists out there. They're not something merely to combat or fight, but rather how might you get close to these rationalities, explore them, figure out their intricacies, and know that there's no innocence here, that we're all implicated in the ongoing construction of these discourses, that capitalism exists, or capitalist rationalities exist within systems of knowledge production that are informed by socio-political and economic movements. So in this way, our arguments need to push beyond individual morality and individual choice and look more toward the systemic conditions that predicate one's ability to respond to current times. So a disposition toward individualism is in many ways a product of this capitalist mentality that functions within neoliberal worlds, where individual success is predicated on personal wealth, accumulation, and autonomy. So what is neoliberalism and how might we make sense of it in times of advanced capitalism? Springer, Birch, and McLeavy write that, quote, at a base level, we can say that when we make reference to neoliberalism, we're generally referring to the new political, economic, and social arrangements within society that emphasize market relations, retasking the role of the state, and individual responsibility. So most scholars tend to agree that neoliberalism is broadly defined as the extension of competitive markets into all areas of life, including the economy, politics, and society. So in this way, neoliberal functions not only at an economic level, but it also determines how you live your life in many ways. And the choices that you make in relation to the values that neoliberalism upholds. So there are reasons beyond individual choice that frame our decision-making abilities and our dispositions and responses. So we can return here to our first portfolio entry to think again about how epistemology, or our ways of thinking, are closely related with economic principles and wealth. So then what ways of thinking, what knowledges are privileged when we consider this? What happens to indigenous knowledges within capitalist societies that are foregrounded on efficiency, accumulation, individualism, and competition? These are questions that point to the structural and systemic operations and oppressions that position some people with the privilege to pull your boots up, as it said, and work hard in what mirrors the American dream, where individual progress and a gain toward the good life fuels your desire to move forward. But what we need to consider here is, in reading with Stingers, is what is this good life? What is happiness? And where do these imaginaries come from? So perhaps the dream and the tireless pursuit of Western happiness might be considered a central ally in capitalist future making. And Christina Vintimilla argues that focusing on neoliberalism's political and social consequences requires that we think about neoliberalism beyond economic definitions and examine it as what she says, quote, a rationality one which expands its normative ideology and values to other spheres of life through specific discourses and practices. And I think that what Stengers is trying to get at in these chapters is that we need to move beyond thinking about only individual choice and consider the systemic discourses that inform how we think and the dangers of those ways of thinking and how entrepreneurial they really are. So this week, Stengers highlights how capitalism has a tendency to propagate everything into its service. So this week you'll be reading and discussing about what she calls a pharmacon, both an antidote and a poison to something. And this is sort of a metaphor for responses to the intrusion of Gaia that might unwittingly fall back into old patterns, back into capitalist rationalities without it becoming apparent or visible to those who are enacting them. So in this week's reading, Stengers subtly proposes some orientations and dispositions to knowledge making that resist this danger of the pharmacon. And in your virtual collaboratory groups this week, you'll be discussing what are some of these orientations and what are some of these dispositions. What is Stengers gesturing towards in order to avoid this new ideas becoming a poison? Yeah, so I think that's everything that I want to say for this week. Again, some of you have reached out for help with your portfolio entries, trying to make sense of some of the concepts if they're challenging. I encourage you to continue to do this, and I look forward to seeing your posts this week and continuing our discussions. Have a great time, everybody. Thanks.